hydraulic warning light flickered red on the Boeing 777th instrument panel as Captain Sophia Reynolds felt the controls grow heavy in her hands. 37,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, with 247 souls aboard United Flight 892, both primary hydraulic systems had failed simultaneously. The aircraft's fly-by-wire controls were degrading by the minute, and the nearest diversion airport was still 400 nautical miles away. In the passenger cabin, coffee service continued normally as travelers remained oblivious to the fact that their aircraft was rapidly becoming unflyable. What they didn't know was that the calm voice over the intercom belonged to someone who had once landed damaged aircraft on carrier decks in storms that would terrify seasoned pilots. Welcome to Those Who Left a Trace, where we uncover the extraordinary stories of people whose greatest battles remain hidden behind everyday uniforms. Before we dive into this incredible tale of skill under pressure, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe that heroes walk among us in the most unexpected places, hit that subscribe button and join our community. The morning had begun routinely at San Francisco International Airport as Captain Sophia Reynolds completed her pre-flight walk-around of the massive Boeing 777-300R. Her first officer, Captain Michael Torres, a veteran pilot with 15,000 flight hours, watched with professional respect as she conducted the inspection with meticulous attention to detail. There was something about her methodology, the way she examined each component with the thoroughness of someone who understood that mechanical failure at altitude meant the difference between life and death for everyone aboard. "Everything looks good, Captain," Torres observed as they completed the exterior inspection. "Weather's perfect for the Trans-Pacific crossing. Winds are favorable, and we got a full load of fuel plus reserves." Sophia nodded, her dark hair pulled back in the regulation style that every commercial pilot wore, her captain stripes barely visible on the navy blue uniform that disguised years of training most people would never know about. "Good. Let's get these people to Tokyo safely." United Flight 892 was scheduled as a routine 11-hour flight from San Francisco to Narita International Airport, carrying 247 passengers and 16 crew members across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The passenger manifest included business travelers, families on vacation, and international students returning to Japan. For most of them, the flight would be forgettable, another routine journey in the modern miracle of commercial aviation. As the 777 pushed back from the gate at 1,347 hours Pacific time, Sophia conducted the standard crew briefing with the practiced efficiency that marked her 5 years as a commercial airline captain. Her transition from military service to civilian aviation had been seamless, though she rarely spoke about her previous career to colleagues who assumed she had followed the traditional route through regional airlines and flight training programs. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Sophia's voice carried clearly through the aircraft's public address system as they reached their cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. "We're expecting a smooth flight today with favorable winds that should get us into Tokyo about 30 minutes ahead of schedule. Flight attendants, you're clear to begin service." For the first 6 hours of the flight, everything proceeded exactly according to plan. The aircraft performed flawlessly as they crossed the international date line. Passengers settled into the rhythm of a long-haul flight, and the flight attendants maintained their service with professional courtesy. Sophia and Torres alternated between monitoring the automated systems and engaging in the casual conversation that helped pass time during the long oceanic crossing. "You know, Captain," Torres said during one of their routine position reports to air traffic control, "I've flown with a lot of pilots over the years, but your system management is exceptional. Where did you train before coming to United?" Sophia glanced at her first officer with a practiced deflection that had become second nature during her civilian career. "Various places. Military background. Then worked my way up to the regionals like everyone else." It was technically true, though it omitted the fact that her military background included 2,000 hours in F/A 18 Super Hornets, 147 carrier landings, and 3 combat deployments to the Persian Gulf where she had flown close air support missions that remained classified years after her transition to civilian life. At 1947 hours, approximately 1,200 nautical miles west of the California coast, the first indication of trouble appeared as a subtle vibration in the aircraft's control systems. Sophia noticed it immediately, her hands detecting the slight change in feel that most pilots might have dismissed as routine turbulence. "Mike, are you feeling that vibration in the controls?" she asked, her attention focused on the instrument panel, where all systems continued to show normal indications. Torres concentrated on his controls, nodding slowly. "Yeah, I'm getting it too. Feels like it's coming from the hydraulic system. All indications are normal, though." Sophia's training kicked in with the automatic assessment that separated experienced pilots from those who relied solely on instrument readings. The vibration had a specific frequency that suggested mechanical stress in the aircraft's primary control systems, and her experience with high-performance aircraft had taught her to trust tactile feedback as much as digital displays. "Let's run through the hydraulic system checklist," she decided. "Something doesn't feel right." As they began their systematic evaluation of the aircraft hydraulic systems, Sophia's hands moved across the controls with a practiced efficiency that came from thousands of hours managing complex aircraft systems under stress. Her scan pattern, the way she prioritized information, and her decision-making process bore the hallmarks of training that went far beyond standard commercial aviation programs. At 1952 hours, the first hydraulic system failure warning illuminated on the flight deck as fluid pressure in the center hydraulic system dropped below minimum operating parameters. The 777 sophisticated flight management system immediately began redistributing control authority to the remaining hydraulic systems, maintaining normal flight characteristics while alerting the crew to the developing emergency. Center hydraulic system failure, Torres announced, following standard crew resource management protocols. Running the emergency checklist now. Sophia maintained manual control of the aircraft, while Torres worked through the complex emergency procedures that govern hydraulic system failures on the Boeing 777. The aircraft was designed with multiple redundant systems specifically to handle this type of failure, and under normal circumstances, the loss of one hydraulic system would be manageable. Center system is completely offline, Torres reported after completing the checklist. Left and right systems are maintaining normal pressure and flow. We're still fully controllable, but we should consider a precautionary diversion to anchorage. Sophia evaluated their options with the tactical thinking that had once made her one of the Navy's most trusted pilots. Anchorage was 800 nautical miles to the north, adding significant distance to their route, but providing the safety of a major airport with full emergency services. Continuing to Tokyo remained possible with the remaining hydraulic systems, but carried increased risk if additional failures occurred. "Let's continue toward Tokyo for now," she decided. "Monitor the remaining systems carefully, and we'll reassess if anything else develops." The decision reflected the calculated risk assessment that combat pilots learn to make under pressure, accepting manageable risk to accomplish the mission while maintaining multiple backup plans if the situation deteriorated. For the next 45 minutes, the aircraft continued normally as passengers remained unaware that their flight was now operating with degraded systems. At 20:37 hours, everything changed. The second hydraulic failure occurred without warning as the left system suffered a catastrophic pressure loss that sent warning alarms throughout the flight deck. Within seconds, the right hydraulic system began showing erratic pressure readings that suggested imminent failure of the aircraft's final backup system. Left hydraulic failure, Torres called out, his voice tight with professional concern. Right system showing fluctuating pressure. Sophia felt the aircraft's controls grow heavy in her hands as the fly-by-wire system struggled to maintain normal flight characteristics with only one partially functioning hydraulic system. The 777 sophisticated computers were working to compensate, but she could feel the aircraft becoming increasingly difficult to control. Right hydraulic system failure. Torres announced as the final system indicators went red. We're down to manual reversion on all controls. In manual reversion, the massive Boeing 777 became a fundamentally different aircraft. Without hydraulic assistance, control inputs required enormous physical strength, and the aircraft's response became sluggish and unpredictable. Most commercial pilots train for this emergency scenario in simulators, but few ever experience the reality of flying a wide-body aircraft with complete hydraulic failure. Declaring emergency, Sophia transmitted to air traffic control, her voice remaining calm despite the severity of their situation. United 892, we have complete hydraulic failure and are requesting vectors to the nearest suitable airport. United 892, roger your emergency. Be advised the nearest suitable airport is Anchorage, Alaska, bearing 045 degrees, distance 720 nautical miles. Vector heading 045, descend and maintain flight level 350. 720 nautical miles with an aircraft that was barely controllable. Sophia began calculating fuel consumption, descent rates, and approach speeds with a mental precision that had once allowed her to land damaged fighters on carrier decks in weather conditions that grounded conventional aircraft. Mike, I need you to work with the flight attendants to prepare the cabin for emergency landing procedures, she instructed. Don't panic the passengers, but make sure everyone understands this is serious. As Torres coordinated with the cabin crew, Sophia focused on the immediate challenge of keeping the aircraft stable and on course toward Anchorage. Every control input required careful consideration, as the aircraft's response was delayed and often unpredictable without hydraulic assistance. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Her voice carried to the cabin with calm authority that belied the severity of their situation. We're experiencing some mechanical issues that require us to divert to Anchorage, Alaska. As a precaution, our flight attendants will be demonstrating emergency procedures. Please give them your full attention and follow all instructions carefully. In the cabin, passengers began to sense that something more serious than a routine diversion was occurring. The flight attendants moved through the aisles with professional efficiency, demonstrating brace positions and reviewing emergency evacuation procedures with an urgency that suggested real danger. Captain Torres returned to the flight deck after coordinating with the cabin crew. Passengers are secured and briefed. Flight attendants report everyone is following instructions. What's our approach plan for Anchorage? Sophia studied the approach charts for Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, mentally calculating the challenges of landing a hydraulically compromised 777 on runways that, while long enough, would require precise airspeed and descent rate management. We'll need to use engine power for speed control and accept a higher approach speed than normal, she explained. The aircraft won't flare normally without hydraulic controls, so we're looking at a control crash landing more than a conventional approach. The phrase control crash landing sent a chill through Torres, but he recognized the technical accuracy of Sophia's assessment. Without hydraulic controls, the aircraft's landing characteristics will be fundamentally compromised, requiring techniques that went beyond standard commercial aviation training. Have you ever landed an aircraft in this configuration before? Torres asked. Sophia's hands moved across the controls with steady precision as she maintained course toward Anchorage. Similar situations, different aircraft, but the principles are the same. What she didn't mention was that her experience included emergency landings aboard aircraft carriers with battle-damaged F divided by -18s. Situations where hydraulic failures, engine problems, and structural damage require the kind of precision flying that most pilots only read about in emergency procedures manuals. As they approached the Alaskan coast, air traffic control coordinated with emergency services to a full rescue and firefighting equipment standing by. Ambulances, fire trucks, and emergency medical teams positioned themselves along the runway, preparing for an outcome that could range from a successful emergency landing to a catastrophic crash. United 892, you're clear for straight-in approach to runway 07 left. Winds are 080 at 15 knots, visibility 10 miles, ceiling unlimited. Emergency equipment is standing by. Roger. Cleared for approach runway 07 left. United 892. Sophia began the most challenging approach of her commercial aviation career, using techniques learned during countless carrier landings where precision was measured in feet and seconds rather than the more forgiving margins of civilian airports. Her scan pattern accelerated as she monitored airspeed, altitude, and descent rate while fighting controls that required constant physical effort to maintain. Speed 180 knots, altitude 3,000 feet on glide path, Torres called out, monitoring instruments while Sophia concentrated on manual control of the aircraft. Roger. I'm going to need full flaps and landing gear at 2,000 feet. The aircraft will become more difficult to control, but we need maximum drag for a stable approach. As they descended through 2,000 feet, Torres deployed the landing gear and flaps, causing the aircraft to shudder and require immediate control inputs to maintain approach path. Sophia's hands moved continuously across the controls, making constant adjustments with the kind of hand-eye coordination that marked truly exceptional pilots. 1,000 feet, speed 170 knots, slightly high on glide path, Torres announced. Understood. I'm going to use engine power to increase descent rate. This is where it gets interesting. Sophia reduced power on all three engines simultaneously, causing the massive aircraft to settle toward the runway at a rate that would have been alarming under normal circumstances. Without hydraulic controls, she was essentially flying the aircraft onto the runway, using only engine power and aerodynamic controls that responded slowly and unpredictably. 500 feet, speed 165 knots, on glide path. Landing clearance confirmed. Emergency equipment is ready. 100 feet, speed 160 knots. The Boeing 777 crossed the runway threshold at a speed significantly higher than normal, its descent rate controlled only by Sophia's precise management of engine power and aerodynamic configuration. Without hydraulic assistance, the aircraft couldn't flare normally, requiring her to time the landing with split-second precision. The main landing gear contacted the runway with a firm impact that sent vibrations throughout the aircraft, followed immediately by Sophia's application of maximum reverse thrust and aerodynamic braking. The aircraft decelerated along the 10,000-foot runway as emergency vehicles paced alongside. Ready to respond, the landing became a crash. United 892, successful landing. Taxi to gate A7, where emergency equipment will meet the aircraft. As the 777 rolled to a stop at the gate, spontaneous applause erupted throughout the cabin from passengers who understood they had just experienced something extraordinary. Sophia shut down the engines with hands that remained steady despite the physical and mental demands of the emergency landing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Anchorage. Her voice carried to the cabin with the same calm professionalism that had marked the entire flight. Emergency services will be meeting the aircraft as precaution, but everyone should remain seated until we complete our post-landing procedures. As passengers began to disembark, several approached the flight deck to thank the crew personally. Among them was a passenger who had introduced himself earlier as Lieutenant Commander Jake Ripper Morrison, a Navy pilot returning from deployment. "Captain, that was exceptional flying," Morrison said, studying Sophia with a professional assessment of one pilot evaluating another. "I've seen carrier landings that weren't as smooth as what you just accomplished with a hydraulically compromised widebody." "Thank you," Sophia replied with a modest deflection that had become habitual. "Just doing the job." Morrison's expression suggested he recognized something in her technique that went beyond standard commercial aviation training. "What type of aircraft did you fly before transition to airlines?" "Various military aircraft. Nothing too exciting." "Mind if I ask where you trained?" Sophia glanced at Torres, who was completing post-flight paperwork and listening to the conversation with growing curiosity. "Naval Air Station Pensacola, among other places." Morrison's eyes widened slightly. "Pensacola? That's where they train Navy pilots. What aircraft type?" Before Sophia could deflect the question again, another voice joined the conversation. Captain Reynolds? I'm Commander Lisa Shark Chun, VFA 11 Red Rippers. I was dead heading on this flight. Sophia felt her carefully maintained civilian identity beginning to crack as she found herself face-to-face with active-duty Navy pilots whose expressions suggested growing recognition. Commander, she acknowledged with the automatic courtesy that military training had ingrained. Captain, I have to ask, your landing technique, the way you manage that emergency approach, that's not standard commercial aviation flying. That's precision approach and landing system technique. Where did you learn to fly like that? Torres looked between the three pilots, sensing undercurrents of recognition that he didn't understand. Is there something I should know about my captain's background? Commander Chin studied Sophia's face with the intensity of someone accessing memory files. Captain Reynolds, did you ever fly under a different call sign? The question hung in the air like a challenge that Sophia could no longer deflect with vague references to military background and various aircraft. Why do you ask, Commander? Because the pilot I'm thinking of was one of the best stick-and-rudder pilots the Navy ever produced. Someone who could land damaged aircraft in conditions that would ground most aviators. Someone whose emergency flying techniques became legendary in the carrier aviation community. Lieutenant Commander Morrison leaned forward, his expression suggesting pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Wait a minute. Reynolds? Sophia Reynolds. I know that name from somewhere. Commander Chen's expression shifted from curiosity to certainty. Captain, were you ever known by the call sign Viper? The simple question shattered 7 years of carefully maintained civilian identity as Torres and several other crew members who had gathered to listen to the conversation stared at Sophia with new understanding. Viper? Torres repeated. As in Lieutenant Commander Sophia Viper Reynolds, the pilot who holds a record for the most difficult carrier landing in Navy history. Sophia realized that her secret was no longer sustainable as the two active-duty pilots looked at her with the recognition that came from stories told and retold throughout the naval aviation community. Commander Chun, Lieutenant Commander Morrison, I think this conversation might be better continued in private. Captain, Morrison said, his voice carrying new respect. If you're the Viper, I think you are. You're the pilot who landed an F-18 on the carrier Abraham Lincoln in 40-knot winds with battle damage and only one engine. That landing is still used as an example in training programs. Commander Chin nodded in agreement. And if my memory is correct, Lieutenant Commander Reynolds left active duty after completing 3 combat deployments with a perfect safety record and decorations for valor that are still classified. Torres stared at his captain with the dawning realization that he had been flying alongside a living legend whose military achievements were the subject of stories he had heard, but never imagined he would encounter firsthand. Captain Reynolds, he said quietly, how many hours do you have in military aircraft? Sophia looked around the group of pilots and crew members who were waiting for an answer that would either confirm or deny their growing suspicions about her true background. 2,847 hours in F/A-18 Super Hornets, she said simply. 147 carrier landings, including 23 in weather conditions above normal operating limits. The group fell silent as the implications of her revelation sank in. They had just witnessed emergency flying techniques that were legendary in military aviation circles, performed by someone whose civilian identity had concealed one of the most decorated careers in modern naval aviation. Captain, Commander Chin said with obvious respect, why didn't you ever mention your Navy background? Because I left that life behind when I transitioned to civilian aviation. I want to be judged as a commercial pilot, not as someone trading on military achievements. Morrison shook his head in amazement. But what you just accomplished, landing a hydraulically compromised 777 with that level of precision, that's not something you can separate from your military training. That's exactly the kind of flying that made Viper legendary in the first place. As the conversation continued, other crew members and passengers began to understand that they had just experienced something extraordinary, Emergency flying by someone whose skills were the result of training and experience that few civilian pilots ever acquired. Ladies and gentlemen, came an announcement over the airport's public address system. United Flight 892 has been met by emergency services as a precautionary measure. All passengers and crew are safe, and the aircraft landing was accomplished without injury thanks to exceptional crew performance. Torres looked at Sophia with new understanding of why her flying techniques had always seemed different from other commercial pilots he had worked with. "Captain, all those times you've demonstrated procedures that seemed unusually precise, all those emergency training sessions where you knew techniques that weren't in our manuals, that was military training." "Some of it, yes." Commander Chin approached with a formal bearing that marked official Navy business. "Captain Reynolds, I'm going to need to report this incident through Navy channels. An emergency landing of this significance, accomplished by someone with your background and security clearances, requires notification of appropriate authorities." Sophia nodded, understanding that her civilian anonymity was ending whether she wanted it to or not. "I understand, Commander. Do what you need to do." As emergency services completed their evaluation of the aircraft and passengers continued disembarking, word of the emergency landing began spreading through social media and aviation forums. Videos taken by passengers during the approach showed the precision and control that had marked the landing, and speculation about the pilot's identity began circulating among aviation enthusiasts. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story of United Flight 892's emergency landing, focusing on the pilot's skill and the fact that all 247 passengers and crew had been saved by exceptional flying. As reporters began investigating the background of Captain Sophia Reynolds, they uncovered a story that was more extraordinary than anyone had imagined. Captain Reynolds, a reporter approached her at the hotel where United had accommodated the crew and passengers. "We've been researching your background and discovered that you're actually Lieutenant Commander Sophia Viper Reynolds, holder of multiple Navy commendations for exceptional flying. Can you comment on how your military experience contributed to today's successful emergency landing?" Sophia looked at the reporter with a calm demeanor that had marked a response to the hydraulic emergency. "I used the training and experience available to me to accomplish the mission safely. That's what any pilot would do. But Captain, your military record shows achievements that go far beyond normal pilot training. You're credited with saving multiple aircraft and crews during combat operations, and your emergency flying techniques are still taught at Navy training facilities." As more reporters arrived and the story gained national attention, Sophia realized that her quiet civilian career was ending. The emergency landing had revealed not just her military background, but her identity as one of the most skilled pilots the Navy had ever produced. 3 days later, as United Flight 892's passengers continued their journey to Tokyo aboard a replacement aircraft, the story of Captain Sophia Viper Reynolds had become a sensation in both civilian and military aviation circles. Video footage of the emergency landing was analyzed by experts who marveled at the precision and control displayed during what should have been a catastrophic situation. "The techniques displayed during this emergency landing," commented Captain Robert Hayes, a retired Navy pilot and aviation safety expert, "represent the highest levels of pilot skill and training. This wasn't just good flying. This was masterful aircraft handling under conditions that would have challenged even the most experienced military pilots." The Federal Aviation Administration announced that Captain Reynolds' emergency landing would be studied as an example of exceptional crew resource management and emergency flying techniques. The National Transportation Safety Board praised her decision-making and aircraft control during a situation that had the potential for catastrophic loss of life. Back at United Airlines headquarters, Captain Reynolds was called into a meeting with senior management who had questions about her background and the implications of her military service for her civilian career. "Captain Reynolds," said Chief Pilot Margaret Sullivan, "we've been reviewing your personnel file in light of recent events. While we're obviously pleased with the outcome of Flight 892's emergency, we need to understand why your military background wasn't fully disclosed during your hiring process." Ma'am, all required information was disclosed according to FAA and company requirements. My military service was documented, but specific details of my training and operational experience weren't relevant to civilian aviation qualification. Captain, the level of skill you demonstrated suggests training and experience that go significantly beyond what most commercial pilots receive. Our flight training department is interested in incorporating some of your techniques into our emergency training programs. As Sophia's story continued to generate attention throughout the aviation community, she received an unexpected phone call that would change her civilian career trajectory once again. Captain Reynolds, this is Admiral Patricia Morrison, Commander Naval Air Forces. I believe you know my son, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, who was aboard your flight. Yes, Admiral. How can I help you? Captain, the Navy would like to discuss your potential return to active duty or consultation on advanced pilot training programs. Your emergency landing has reminded us of capabilities we lost when you transitioned to civilian aviation. Sophia considered the offer as she looked out at the commercial aircraft lined up at San Francisco International Airport, representing the civilian career she had built after leaving the Navy. The emergency landing had revealed not just her military background, but the fact that some skills and training couldn't be separated from the person who possessed them. Admiral, I appreciate the offer, but I'm committed to civilian aviation. However, I would be willing to consult on training programs that could benefit both military and civilian pilots. That's exactly what we had in mind, Captain. Your unique experience in both military and civilian aviation makes you an ideal candidate for developing cross-training programs. As Captain Sophia of Viper, Reynolds returned to her regular flying schedule. She carried with her the knowledge that her carefully maintained separation between military and civilian careers had ended. But rather than viewing this as a loss of privacy, she began to see opportunities to contribute to aviation safety and training in ways that her dual experience made possible. The emergency landing of United Flight 892 became a case study in exceptional pilot skill and the value of diverse training backgrounds in commercial aviation. For 247 passengers and crew members, it represented the difference between a routine flight and a survival story that they would remember for the rest of their lives. And for Captain Sophia Reynolds, it marked the end of anonymity and the beginning of a new phase in her aviation career where her complete experience could be used to benefit others who shared the challenges and responsibilities of flying.